What's up, everybody? Welcome to Gojo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Claudia Bellafato, and I both holding it down here in the DraftKings studio in Boston. Awesome show for you guys today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave it a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, right here on DraftKings Network, the YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, and Roku. You can catch the best of Gojo and Golic from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, wherever you hear VSiN on the radio as well. Our buddy Charlotte Wilder going to be here for a Wilder Wednesday on a Tuesday, so as usual, the announcement, don't touch your dials. We'll get into plenty with her, the co-host of Oddball with Amin El Hassan, as we look at the NBA action from last night. Big win for the Bucks. The Lakers? Getting a little froggy? We'll also welcome in Sal Paolantonio this morning, longtime ESPN NFL reporter, formerly also of the Philadelphia Inquirer, for the express purposes of this conversation, because it is Jason Kelce Coronation Day around here, Dad, as we get set to go one of the most famous interior offensive linemen of all time. And I feel pretty comfortable saying that in terms of famous. We can debate his place in Canton, which I really don't think is much of a debate. We can debate where he stands all time amongst centers in the NFL's history, interior offensive linemen in the NFL's history. But in modern football, to have a guy that plays this position be as well known as he has become over the last few years, decide to call it quits yesterday and announce his retirement after 13 seasons with the Philadelphia Eagles. Dad, you saw the reaction from across the sports world, from across the pop culture world, to a guy who's become somewhat of an icon for wearing his heart on his sleeve the way that he did.
Yeah, it really has. He's such a great personality. He's that true definition of that football player, right? That bearded grizzly bear who just will play through anything. Perfect for the city of Philadelphia, the blue-collar town that is. And he said it in his speech, and we've all said it when spending time there. Play hard. They'll respect you for playing hard. They'll get on you if you're not playing well, but if you got to play hard and give a damn. And Jason was that guy, another one who, that's what always been impressive with me with these brothers who will be in the Hall of Fame someday, he and Travis. They weren't first round, hey, come into the league, you guys are projected to be stars. because of where you're drafted. This guy was a running back and a linebacker before he was an offensive lineman, or a fullback before he was an old lineman. Worked his way up. I mean, even admitted when he was playing bad, but he ended up being the guy in Philly for so long. And in the era of players getting involved in the media, he and his brother with their pod, New Heights, I mean, has we've seen other athletes just kind of rise up. Some do, some don't, depending on their personality. And these two have such a great personality together, differing personality for sure, that you can raise to these heights if you're an athlete right now, a current athlete, and he did. And it's going to go beyond into his broadcasting career or whatever he wants to do. But what a speech. I don't know, Mike, what's left for the Hall of Fame speech.
Right.
He kind of threw it all out there. He just rinse and repeat this speech for his Hall of Fame speech.
I'd just do it like a substitute teacher. I would wheel out the TV cart. I would pop this into the VHS, and I would just hit play and go all over again because it was beautifully written. Like I was texting ESPN NFL analyst Mina Kimes, who began her career as a writer, was texting me saying he has no right to be this good at writing after being so good at podcasting and incredible as a likely first ballot Hall of Famer on the offensive line. Like what he said was beautiful. And Claudia and I were talking about this before the show. Jason Kelce, in addition to being one of our nation's premier wife guys, his ode to Kylie Kelce, his wife, is going to be the stuff that gets a lot of husbands in trouble for the rest of the year of why can't you be more like him, but also one of the biggest criers we've ever seen in a way that I love so dearly.
Yeah, the over-under on how many times he would cry during that speech definitely set at 10.5, and it was an easy over. Before he even started talking, he's like, let's see how much I can get through. 2 seconds, started crying. Even he's telling ridiculous stories about Nick Foles and throwing some crazy terms out there. He's crying in between that. So Hall of Fame speech, but yes, of course, someday Hall of Fame. We have the graphic up there for those just listening and not seeing most consecutive starts in franchise history, most regular season games played by an O-lineman in franchise history. You said he's a grizzly bear on the field, Senior, but a teddy bear, I think, in person off the field.
And I think that's why people, when people are wondering, listen, part of this is certainly what's gone on with Travis, Taylor Swift fans getting involved. The amount of tweets I saw yesterday of, I can't believe I listened to Tim McGraw 18 years ago, and now I'm sitting here crying at Jason Kelce's retirement. So we've seen there's that large portion of fans that obviously came to them that way. But Dad, I think for everybody else, when you look at Jason Kelce and what the appeal has been there, a couple of things are what he said in the speech yesterday, and he talked about how much he loved football. And one of the things he loved about it was everything was hard. He said in other things that he played, things came easy. It was a little bit easier to come by, but he said everything in football was hard, and his career was a testament to that. The 6 All-Pros for Jason Kelce all came in the second half of his career. You mentioned he came in as a 6th-round draft pick. He was a good player in the lead-up, and then talked about 2016 was a year he thought he was going to get shipped out of there, said everyone else would have let him go, but talked about Jeff Stoutland, his offensive line coach, and what he meant to him and how his belief spurred on the next portion of his career where he did have 6 first-team All-Pros in 7 years. And so that testament to doing it the right way, doing it the hard way, and doing it in a way where he did wear those emotions on his sleeve. He was great and articulate and so giving when it came to his time in the media, but everyone you see, his former teammates and guys that have been around him in the trenches, understood there was no one who was going to lay it on the line more than Jason Kelce. And as a teammate, that's all you wanted, is someone you could depend on the way he clearly could be depended upon, but also someone whose passion and whose intensity you could count on in the most critical moments on the field time and time again.
So he's a new school player with an old school style, right? Playing in the era of the new type of players, but understood that it took hard work. He didn't come in, he came in as an undersized guy, came in as a 6th-rounder, played well, then didn't play well. As you mentioned, he even said, thought he was going to get shipped out and knew what it was going to take was more work. Worked on his feet, worked on his hands, worked on his get-off. I mean, this is a guy who just explains the way. There's no magic pill, to be one of the greatest. There's hard work that you have to put in, and there's ups and there's downs now to the tune of he's the 5th center in NFL history with at least 6 All-Pro selections. Jim Otto, Bulldog Turner, Damani Dawson, and Jim Ringo, all those guys are in the Hall of Fame. Since the 70 merger, the only center has won a Super Bowl and earned first-team All-Pro honors 6 times. So he worked for all that. That's the impressive thing. And again, that's why it's a great fit anywhere. A hard-working story is just a great message. But then you do it in Philly, where that's the epitome of you work hard, they love you. You don't work hard, and they see that, and it's gonna be a long time before they forget that. He encapsulated what Philadelphia is, what football is, and what hard work is to achieve what you want to achieve.
Yeah, in my mind, he is the patron saint of undersized offensive linemen. As someone who played that position and was on the smaller side of that, to watch what Jason did in a land full of giants, some of the most physically impressive and gifted athletes on the planet, the fact that you had this guy who just took a Bulldogs mentality to it and a sledgehammer and a chisel every day to try and get to the point that he did, it's remarkable, I think, for everybody involved. And I do want to play this clip because I think we mentioned the work that he did and the influences around this. He certainly talked about his brother, which we've all seen that relationship on display. He talked about his wife, Kylie Kelsey, and I don't want to downplay the family element of this, but I think because we hear so much about that, I wanted to play the clip of him talking about Jeff Stoutland, his offensive line coach, and what he meant to him in his development in this journey.
No one has been more influential or meaningful to my success on the field in my career than Stout. I think one of the greatest things a human being can give another is belief. This world, life, it can be hard. It can challenge yourself to points of self-doubt, and that is a dangerous place to be. Well, I am lucky. My whole life, I have been surrounded by people that have believed in me. My father, my mother, my brother, Paul Longo, Howard Mudd, and in my darkest hour as a Philadelphian, Stout was the one who believed in me. He was adamant my problems could be fixed with proper technique, fundamentals, and work. And work we did.
Dad, that's one of those things, and listening to that just as a general thing, I hope everybody who plays sports has a chance to have a coach who means that much to them and have someone who believes in them in that way. I can tell you from personal experience, but everyone can see through Jason's experience, you can change the entire course of someone's life with a little bit of that belief and the right tools. And I'm sure you yourself, I know, have plenty of sports figures and coaches in your experience that meant that much to you, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. Someone who believes in you, someone who works with you. Because, listen, even at that level, you have to believe in yourself. But still, as he even said, when he's going through the dark times, you're up there with some of the greatest athletes in the world, and you're not playing at the level you need to play. Boy, it's great to have that helping hand. And Stout was that guy, that guy behind the scenes for Jason to help him believe and put him through the work. You also have to not be afraid of hard work. Someone's going to help you, they can help you, but you got to be the one to work. So it was a great team, those two, without question.
A great team, and listen, we are fortunate now as we try and put this into proper context. Jason Kelsey, Dad, as you mentioned, embodied Philadelphia in the way that few athletes do. And so if we're going to talk about embodying Philadelphia, no one better to bring in than our next guest here in Sal Paolantonio, longtime ESPN NFL reporter here. You guys know him, obviously, as associated with Philadelphia as anyone has worked with the Philly Inquirer there. Kind enough to join us now. And Sal, let's just start there. Jason Kelsey's retirement yesterday. As you're watching this unfold, what did he mean to the city of Philadelphia for what he gave to them?
Well, Michael, I think, you said it best, patron saint. I mean, he was an iconic figure on and off the football field. And what a great speech maker. I mean, he's 2 for 2. I was there with Kevin Nagandi. We covered the parade on SportsCenter after the Eagles won the Super Bowl in 2017 season. And he dresses up as a mummer, a leprechaun mummer, and gives the speech of a lifetime on the steps of Rocky at the Art Museum in Philadelphia. What more iconic moment can you possibly have? And then he follows it up with this speech at NovaCare. So I think he's, you said patron saint, iconic character for sure. I think he's on the Mount Rushmore of Philadelphia Eagles of all time. I think he's he's one of the 4 all-time greatest Philadelphia Eagles, no question about it. If you ask me who they were, it would have to be Chuck Bednarik, Jason Kelsey, then I would go for sure Harold Carmichael, because and this is my personal preference, And then, of course, Mike Golick would be the number 4 on that
There
list.
we go.
I would have to pay a ticket to go see that Mount Rushmore for sure.
I would drive you there, Michael. I would drive you there.
Yeah. And the great thing, too, about Kelce is in those 2 speeches you mentioned, one he's in a mummer outfit, and the other it looks like he just finished a workout in the weight room and then stopped by to announce his retirement. Yeah. I mean, that's Jason Kelce. So, Sal, take everybody behind a little bit when you see him not in front of the camera. Is he as real as we see in front of the camera?
He is, Mike. You've been in the Eagles locker room. You've seen reporters how they navigate through a locker room. You've seen this reporter how he's navigated through an Eagles locker room, and it can be very, very difficult to do. But the first person that you look for is Jason Kelce because he's the conscience of the team. He calls the shots on the field. He's the guy who calls the protection for Jalen Hurts, which is no small chore. Very, very important. He's the guy who leads the Philly push-tush. He's the guy who has been leading the great blocking schemes set up by Jeff Stoutland for LaShawn McCoy, for DeAndre Swift, for Miles Sanders, and for Jalen Hurts and that great pass protection that they've had over the years. So he is not only the guy who sets the protection in the locker room and sort of protecting the team and is the conscience of the team, but, he's the guy on the field doing the same thing. I mean, he's just a stand-up guy who knows the right notes to play at all times. Very, very rare, especially in a professional athlete, especially in the city of Philadelphia, which, as you know, is passionate but unforgiving. And when you have those 2 sides of the coin, the double edge of the sword, passionate yet unforgiving. So it's a very tough road for an athlete to go down and be successful. And I think he's in the pantheon of all-time greatest, without a doubt. I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
That's where I wanted to go next with you. You mentioned he's on the Mount Rushmore of Eagles players in that franchise's history, but I know offensive line in the Hall of Fame can sometimes be a little bit complicated. Every position's got their own logjam issues, but you think it should be as simple as he's in on the first try?
Well, you look at the greatest centers, Mike, of all time. I wrote, I think I would include Jim Otto, Chuck McNarick for sure, Mike Webster, Dwight Stevenson, Kevin Mawai, Dermontti Dawson. His credentials line up as good as any of those players. So it is hard. I've been on the committee for 12 years now. I'm one of the 46 selectors. I've been in the room. I've been on the Zoom calls. I know how difficult it is for an offensive lineman to go in as a first ballot Hall of Famer. You're talking about Jonathan Ogden, guys like that. It's really tough to do. But I think that he is definitely, without a doubt, for me, a lock. First ballot Hall of Famer because of the credentials. 6 All-Pro selections, led the team to a Super Bowl title. And when you look at what he did in terms of blocking for all of the quarterbacks that he did and the running backs and the accomplishments that they had, greatest seasons and touchdowns and rushing yards and going to the Super Bowl and winning it, I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah, when you're on that Zoom call, Sal, if anybody is debating that he's not, just hang up on that person because you are dead right and they would be dead wrong. Who, in the time we have left here, Sal, who on the team can fill that role, if anybody, now that he is gone?
He's hard to replace, obviously. Like I said, he's a conscience of the team on and off the field. But, they've been grooming Cam Jurgens for a while, and he's been playing guard. And he's obviously been groomed for some time to take over for Jason Kelce. But this is a big job. This is a really big job because, the push-tush is such an important, integral part of what they do. And it looks like it's here to stay, as it should stay as a legal play in the National Football League. And Kelce made it go. And if you listen to Jalen Hurts and to Jeff Stoutland and talk about what is the success of that play, it's 2 things. It's Jalen Hurts' ability to squat like 900 pounds. He's got great leg power. But it's the timing of the snap The timing of the snap is so important. It's at that moment when the defensive line least expects it, but the quarterback and the Eagles offensive line knows it's coming. So they hit it exactly when they have to hit it. And that's going to be a rare thing for Cam Jurgens to try to duplicate. He's going to have to set the protections. That takes a load off of Jalen Hurts. If Jalen Hurts has to do that, that's a responsibility that has to be added to number one at the quarterback position. But then, I mean, the irreplaceable part, Michael, is, like I said, when reporters and cameras come into the locker room and they're looking for the guy who's going to make the statement to settle everybody down or to put them on the launch pad of excitement week in and week out, it's going to fall now to Lane Johnson, Brandon Graham, and Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, in my opinion, really will be the beneficiary of this retirement in many, many ways. I think he will allow him to flourish within his personality, to really take over the leadership, especially on offense and in the locker room.
Couldn't agree more. Such an important voice. You're right in the tush push as well. One of the biggest and best weapons in the NFL. Certainly a major impact there, but like you said, off the field just as much, if not more. Sal, we always appreciate your help and your time. Thank you so much, sir. We hopefully get to talk to you again down the road here soon.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you, guys.
The great Sal Paolantonio,
Thanks, Sal.
kind enough to help put into proper perspective. The mayor of Philadelphia himself right there. I picture Sal Pal outside of a Wawa with the day's Philadelphia Inquirer in my mind when I think of Philadelphia, Dad.
That's exactly right. I mean, because, you know, back in the day a little bit, that was it. You get a newspaper, you get a sub at Wawa, a cup of coffee, and you're good to go.
Like I say, that was the fuel for Sal Pal. And for Jason Kelsey, congrats on retirement and happy trails to the big fella.
Gojo and Golic, the Russell Wilson era, if you want to call it, is officially over in Denver. I think we should probably just call it a short stint, though. 2 years for the 9-time Pro Bowl quarterback in Denver. And keep in mind, this deal was $242.6 million. The Broncos taking an $85 million hit in dead money over the next 2 seasons with the release. Yeah, exactly, Senior. And Wilson released a statement on social thanking everybody, the city of Denver, his teammates, many workers in Denver, but he did not include head coach Sean Payton or any of the ownership, which is interesting. He closed with the quote, "Tough times don't last, but tough people do. God's got me. I'm excited for what's next." Now, let's revisit the trade from 2 years ago, because that's what everybody is doing. This is what sent Russ to Denver. The Seahawks received Noah Fant, Drew Lock, Shelby Harris, 2 first-rounders, 2 second-rounders, and a 5th. And the Broncos received Russell Wilson and a 2022 4th-round pick. So, guys, when we are looking back on the 2 years that was, how would you describe what this trade turned out to be, Senior? I heard your reaction. Now tell me, how would you describe the last 2 years?
I mean, what a complete failure, right? I mean, and it was kind of the perfect storm, which if you saw the movie Perfect Storm, how it ended with a boat getting destroyed, it was kind of a team getting destroyed in the perfect storm. You got new ownership, so you had kind of new lifeblood there. You give the extension to Russell Wilson. Then you bring in Sean Payton, and you can't bring in a guy like Sean Payton and tell him, listen, if you're going to take this job, understand there's an extension with Russ Wilson so he's going to be our quarterback. You can't do that with Sean. You can do that if you brought in a young quarterback. You could say, coming along with this, we got Russell Wilson. But you can't with Sean Payton if you're bringing him in. Sean Payton is going to run the team how he wants to run the team. And if you sign him as the head coach, that's what he should be able to do. And it didn't work out. We questioned how that relationship was going to work anyway, the way Sean called games and the way Russ played. And it was just oil and water right out of the gate. Even while Russ played better this year, you look, it was his shortest passing a yards attempt downfield in his career because he was too busy getting smoked. 100 sacks in the last 2 years, and I'm not making that up as a big number. No. He was sacked 100 times. So when you're sacked 100 times, you're hit at least 3 times that many times. So for getting the sack. So he was under a lot of pressure. We know he escapes well, but that just, once that wasn't going to work, ownership and the capologists had to just be going, oh my God. I mean, we're screwed, and which they are. $85 million in dead cap money over the next 2 years is as much as the next 2 highest dead caps combined. It's a brutal hit they're taking, but as I said, they got caught in that perfect storm of, they couldn't guarantee him those years with a new coach when it was going to be Sean Payton.
Yeah, you mentioned, Dad, the 2 biggest dead cap hits prior to this were Matt Ryan in 2022, $40.5 million, and Aaron Rodgers in 2023 with the Packers at $40.3 million. And so this, Dad, unprecedented in the modern NFL and really the NFL in any era for a team to be willing to saw off this much of their own arm to try and get out from under what is a bad deal. The extension has not even started yet that he signed, by the way. All 5 of those years, still the meat left on the bone here. And Dad, I think this is a good reminder for everyone in every walk of life. Shout out to the great Holly Anderson over at Channel 6. They wanted to, so they did. Like, it's a playoff that if he wanted to, he would. This is a college football move. This is Texas A&M ponying up $75 million to buy out Jimbo Fisher. And a lot of it goes back to me, Dad. What was Sean Payton thinking taking this job? Like, he had to know, Is it just the hubris of thinking I can make it work with Russell Wilson? Because he's good enough at math and has been around this league long enough to know that if this failed, this was always going to be the penalty waiting on the other side. And with the amount of capital gave up, it was going to severely hamstring what you can do. Like, I don't know, Dad, what the Broncos do going forward.
This is also one of those. Sean Payton's have been highly successful in this league. And, coaches' mentality is they can coach anything. They can fix anything. They can manage anything. And also get a big bag along the way. New ownership, they were going to pay for a big-time head coach, and they did. He got a monster salary, and we can't look past that either. And as I said, coaches always think they can rehab a quarterback who struggled. I'm not talking about the Russell Wilson situation, but they always feel they can coach through everything. So now, I mean, they're an absolute cap hell right now. We're going forward with Russ Wilson. It's interesting because you can get him on the cheap because the Broncos are paying the tab. So you could basically get him on the vet minimum if you want, because he's still getting his $39 million from the Broncos, and the team he signs for isn't on the hook for it. So that's good. Why it's going to be very interesting where he ends up in all of this. Do people think he's got a few years left to lead a team, or is he a bridge guy, or are they just saying, you know what, been around too long, don't like what we've seen the last 2 years, we're going to go with a young guy, even though, they haven't produced yet like we want?
Yeah, I think, Dad, at this point, based on what you talked about before, which is the price tag and how much lower it's going to be now that everyone else, I think, is going to see Russell Wilson for what he is, knows how much the Broncos are still going to be paying for him. He is a great bridge gap candidate, especially in a league where you look at what Russ needs to survive. You mentioned lowest, 25th in air yards per attempt this last season, third lowest, I think, in air yards per completion. Like, it was low and slow like a freaking brisket for most of the year with Russ. But you look around the league, what he needs, heavy play action pass, a dynamic run game to be able to lean on instead. That's a lot of the league right now as the Shanahan-McVay coaching tree is sort of branched out. So for the people I know, I think the Steelers are the odds-on favorite to land Russ right now. You look at that team. Hey, they've already got the two-headed monster in the backfield with Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren back there, and you're bringing in Arthur Smith, who we know is a run-first offensive coordinator coming over from Atlanta. So if you want to do that to maybe give Kenny Pickett a little bit of competition or figure out who you're going to bring in next. I know people have brought up the Vikings if Kirk Cousins were to leave. Hey, you bring him in there, you draft a young quarterback, and you have him be the gateway drug towards the next guy. Those are all things that I think are a viable option for a quarterback, Dad, that is serviceable. Like, we saw that this last year. He was not the source of all the Broncos' ills this last year, but he's also not a ceiling raiser anymore. And maybe wasn't as much in the prime of his career as he got credit for.
I do think Pittsburgh is a good fit. I don't know how much we buy into Kenny Pickett. Again, do you keep him and keep trying to work with him? Do you think about drafting someone else, or do you bring in Russ? Because I think with that offense, with that Arthur Smith offense, I agree. They're going to lean on the running game, which is something Pittsburgh does anyway, which could help Russ in the play action, help Russ running the ball as well. It does seem like a good fit, and I do think Minnesota would rather be with a veteran quarterback if in fact it's not Pittsburgh, that Minnesota feels like they can do some winning now. They got to take care of Justin Jefferson, obviously, as well. We know Detroit's the top of that division right now, but is Minnesota that far off with a good quarterback? So that's you'll tell a lot about these teams, the Atlantas, the Pittsburgh, the New England, the Minnesotas, about what they do with the quarterback by where they feel their team is. If you see them get that young quarterback, you feel, okay, maybe they have a little bit to build, I think, like the Patriots, where some of these other teams, like a Pittsburgh or like a Minnesota, are going to want to hit the ground running a little bit more than that. So a more veteran-type quarterback is going to fit that role.
It's going to be interesting in the market. You mentioned New England, Alex Van Pelt going over there from that Stefanski coaching tree, which is, Shanahan-McVay tangent with all that play action, but you're going to have guys like Joe Flacco probably on the market because Deshaun Watson's coming back. You're going to have guys like Jacoby Brissett out there after his time in Washington. So it's interesting to consider. I still, at the end of the day with this, surprised with Sean Payton, knowing he was in TV and going to have options, took this job knowing the landmines that were laying around every corner. And now for this, right now, Dad, it's going to hold the top spot as the worst trade in NFL history, I think, until we see what the conclusion is for Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. Because again, remembering with Deshaun Watson, the multiple first-rounders they gave up there, I think 3 first-rounders, multiple picks after that, and the fully guaranteed $230 million contract for a quarterback who's failed to produce anywhere even close to that, and knowing the reputation stain that was coming with everything he was accused of off the field, could put that in a category all its own when that's all said and done.
Certainly doesn't bode well when you're vying for the worst trade of all time when you're in that conversation. That's just not something you want on the resume, that's for sure.
Gojo and Golic, the franchise tag window is just about to close. 4 p.m. today is the final time. So up until then, teams still have time to tag players. But as of right now, wide receiver Tee Higgins for the Bengals is the only player officially tagged. But we do have a list from Pro Football Talk, who listed the top 10 free agents on the market right now. Chris Jones, D-tackle for the Chiefs at the top. Kirk Cousins, we've been talking about for the Vikings. Number 2 there, you have Josh Allen, not that Josh Allen, the other Josh Allen for the Jags. We talked about Tee Higgins. You look down the board here, guys. We know Mike Evans off the board as of yesterday, staying with the Bucs. Another name on here, though, that pops out to you. Junior, let's go to you first.
Well, I referenced this tweet from the great Marcus Spears, ESPN NFL analyst, former first-round pick for the Dallas Cowboys. If Chris Jones somehow hits real free agency, and any person in your front office doesn't want him, if you have a legitimate shot at getting him, fire them immediately because they are against you.
Yeah.
Like, Dad, that caliber of player getting even close, and I don't think he's going to get that close. I think given the salary cap getting the big bump that it did, and given the fact that it looks like L'Jarius Sneed is going to get the tag and trade potential going on here, I think they're going to have the room to keep Chris Jones, and I think they look at him and say, this is such a foundational piece to our team. We cannot afford to lose him at this juncture. We've drafted well enough on the back end. We've got Trent McDuffie and so many young players that we've invested in and developed there. We think we can absorb one loss on the back end, but this guy on the front end is a different breed, and I tend to agree with them.
Yeah, so L'Jarius Sneed did get the non-exclusive, and it means just that, exclusive tag, non-exclusive tag. That means he can negotiate with other teams and they can work out a deal on a long-term deal and then trade him. So he does have that, and we didn't think Chris Jones was going to get the exclusive tag either because that would have been about a $32 million hit. So there's really only the real tag that Tee Higgins has, and then the non-exclusive for L'Jarius Sneed. I would be stunned if the Chiefs don't re-sign him. I mean, you're in the midst of a dynastic run right now, right? So this is when you keep everything together. This is, to me, it's not when you start moving pieces around because you're signing a new deal. So it can be a long enough deal to where you can keep the cap number palatable. And I think that's the beauty of it. You're not stuck in the middle of a deal that has a high cap number. So you can do the long deal where the last couple of years of it would be restructure time because it would be too high of a cap hit. So I actually think it's a good time for him to be a free agent or for the Chiefs to be able to sign him because it's the beginning of a new big deal to keep that number down a little bit. So I'd be stunned if he wasn't there. So I think it's just a matter of the two things I'm looking for, how much money he ends up getting, and the other one to me is Kirk Cousins. Where does he end up and for how much? Because he has been, as I said yesterday, the business winner in the NFL. Those are two that are really, really interesting to me. Will the Colts use it on Pittman today, the wide receiver? All the franchise tags basically for the positions we're talking about are anywhere between $18 and $22 million that they played for that 1 year. So some interesting scenarios by 4 p.m. Eastern today on who gets tagged, but it doesn't look like a whole lot are.
Kirk Cousins is the most ripple effect, but I do think we talked about this year in the draft. There's not as much talked about or buzz around the high-end defensive prospects in this draft, but we know there's a lot of teams that are going to have need on that side of the ball, and man alive, free agency could potentially have that. Now, I know Adam Schefter said yesterday on McAfee that if deals don't get done by the deadline, Brian Burns, not Josh Allen, but that other Josh Allen, and Justin Madubuike are all expected to be franchise tagged by their organization. One that we heard that isn't, though. Christian Wilkins from the Miami Dolphins, star defensive tackle for them, who's been an absolute monster in two very different defensive schemes each of the last 2 years. Dad, if this guy hits true free agency, I'm fascinated. And the first team I keep thinking of, just because it was such an association with them last year, is, man, what are the Dallas Cowboys? Is there any way they could find their way to be players in this? They seem to be in such cap issues now, but we know they're not going to bring Tyron Smith back. It sounds like their star left tackle, a guy who, again, it should be Ring of Honor candidate, going to be a Hall of Famer there. I'm stunned he's not going to finish his career in a Cowboys uniform, but that is what it is. They've got the Micah Parsons deal coming up on the horizon. They certainly are going to have a lot to talk about with Dak Prescott coming up here, but a player like that, Dad, for a league now where we saw the run game gouge so many people in the postseason. We've talked about, and we talked, with quality defensive tackle play on the rise because of how few defenders are in the box now in a passing league. Christian Wilkins should command a ton of money on the open market and is the kind of player I am again surprised a team like Miami is letting walk out the door.
There should just be players that you definitely bring back, right? Because, again, we're talking about them. If it were a team that wasn't very good right now, would you go ahead and want to pay all that money and by the time the team starts to get good, you're in the horrible cap space of that deal? Well, with Christian Wilkins, man, you have a good Miami team right now. So this is one of those where, man, you got to figure it out. I don't know. I'm with you. I don't know how you could let that guy leave that team. And as I'll repeat about Chris Jones, you do the deal now, you can make it a longer deal, and you could keep the number down a little bit until the last couple of years of the contract. You're right. He's one of those. And Madubuike in Baltimore, they got to keep him, but I could see them tagging him to say, you know what, we want to see it for another year. And then because he's just off his rookie season, off his rookie contract, and wow, what a year. He bet on himself. And man, for those that don't know, going back to training camp, Baltimore tried to extend him. He didn't like the deal, and he said, I'm going to bet on myself. And man, he absolutely hit a blackjack on that one. So he gets tagged. He makes, over $20 million this year, or he gets the long-term deal. But yeah, there are guys for teams that are really good, Mike, that I'm with you. They need to find a way to hang on to these guys because, especially at that position, we mentioned the three, Jones, Madubuike, and Wilkins. This isn't one of those, it's just an interior defensive lineman. No, not the way you talked about it, not the way these guys are playing today and how important they are. It's always been quarterback, left tackle, edge rusher, cornerback. But man, the wide receivers have jumped into this big money game now, and the defensive tackle used to be just Aaron Donald. Then we started to see, a Jeffrey Simmons and others that are jumping into it. And now we're seeing, a handful or just a little less than that who are going to be big money guys as well.
Football's a weird game because it's so much about the ebb and flow of the bodies available to you and what starts getting developed for what reason. And I think what you're seeing on defense right now in the NFL, we've talked about linebackers, light in the ass, been a real problem for a lot of people, and that's not getting better with the guys coming down the pipeline in college right now. You're seeing a lot of guys sub 230 that are the sideline-to-sideline guys that might struggle a little bit more with things coming up the gut. But what you've got right now is a dearth of defensive tackle talent in the NFL. You mentioned a bunch of those names there, and that's where Christian Wilkins finds himself. He's 28 years old, and last season he was one of 6 defensive tackles to register 9 or more sacks. It's him, Justin Madubuike, Chris Jones, Seiler, who was on the team with him in Miami, Ed Oliver, and Kobe Turner. Like, that's a good category to be in right now in a league where you need space eaters, but also guys that can be productive on third down and in passing downs more than ever because you're not getting as much support from the guys behind them as you used to in the NFL before this.
Yeah, one other guy to keep an eye on too, Mike, I think is Jalen Johnson, the cornerback from the Bears. Here we are with another team who looks like they're starting over a quarterback, want to build up again and build in that division where the Detroit Lions are now kind of running the show. Green Bay showed a lot with Jordan Love. We'll see what Minnesota does at quarterback. So where are the Bears? So now they're in a position. Do you say, let's pay this guy, let's tag him possibly, keep him for another year at probably low 20 millions. Again, it's all been in kind of that area. Or do you give him the long-term deal or wait just that 1 year to see where it goes? Because this is going to be a team that isn't magically going to be playoff bound next year. I don't see a Houston Texans run with a rookie quarterback like you saw last year make the playoffs. I don't see that with the Bears. So that's when you start to say, okay, if we give this guy a long-term deal, by the time we get to the tough part of it, cap space, is that when we start to become good with our new quarterback. So I think there's a little more thinking there, and I think you may see him tagged so they know they have that year with him.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. You mentioned the cornerback need. The Dolphins and the Lions are going to be the two teams probably vying for the services of L'Jarius Sneed, and if not, trying to see if they could maybe get in on the Jalen Johnson sweepstakes because both needing in that position desperately coming off last season and going to try and make it happen. Coming up next, though, give Reggie Bush back his Heisman. For the love of God. Johnny Manziel and me next.
Gojo and Golic. Johnny Manziel is not happy, so much so that he is boycotting the Heisman Trophy ceremony in support of Reggie Bush. He is saying that it's not fair, the fact that they took away the Heisman from Bush, who won the trophy back in 2005 at USC. He was forced to return it after an investigation found that he and his family received extra benefits, including cash, a rent-free home for his parents, travel expenses, and more. So Manziel took to X over the weekend to say, after careful thought and consideration, I will be humbly removing myself from the Heisman Trophy ceremony until Reggie Bush gets his trophy back. Doesn't sit right with my morals and values that he can't be on stage with everybody else this year. Reggie is the Heisman Trophy. Do the right thing at NCAA. The ball is in your court. And we saw, Junior, that you seem to agree with him because you got pretty worked up about this when tossing to the segment. Tell us why this makes you so angry,
Because Reggie Bush is the best college football player I've ever seen in my lifetime. Like, of guys I've watched with my own two eyes. And I understand there's a world before that and plenty of guys that might have claim to this. But in my lifetime, Reggie Bush is the best college football player I've ever seen. And this is like the Barry Bonds Hall of Fame argument, where it, to me, makes the award or makes the Hall of Fame look like it's not being serious when you refuse to acknowledge what our eyes all saw. And I understand what happened in real time, but Dad, like Johnny brought up here, as the thought process has changed on all this, and as we've seen, by the way, and I think been reinforced in recent years, the NCAA's association with big-time college, like FBS college football, Division I, whatever you want to call it, we know FCS, FBS, the difference there. The NCAA doesn't sponsor the championship for FBS football. Never had, or at least hasn't for as in my entire lifetime between the BCS and now the college football playoff. It can barely punish anymore. We've seen court injunctions that aren't even letting them go after the NIL stuff they were trying to get back in on right now. And when I scoured the Heisman Trophy's website, I couldn't find any direct, tangible link to the NCAA. And so Reggie Bush had to have a disassociation period of like 10 years when his initial thing got laid down there, when USC went through all the sanctions at the end of the Pete Carroll era. And that ended in 2020. And then the Heisman Trust came out and said, we will welcome Reggie Bush back with open arms when the NCAA reinstates them. And my question is why? The NCAA has no tangible association with the Heisman Trophy, the same way they have no real association with big-time FBS football. So I don't know why we have to listen to them or care what they think when it comes to what everyone involved with this knows and should recognize.
Listen, I agree. But quickly, to give everybody a history lesson who may not remember, Bush and his family accepted cash, travel expenses, and a home in San Diego where Bush's parents lived rent-free for more than a year and got provided $10,000 to furnish that place as well. And once NIL hit, everybody was like, well, that's ridiculous. Now he could have gotten that anyway, so give him everything back. And the NCAA came out and they said, no, that was pay for play, which it still isn't allowed. It's different than NIL. And as part of it, losing the scholarships, USC, that definitely was a bad thing. But the 14 wins were vacated, the national championship vacated. That's like a lion gumming somebody to death. Who gives a damn? I mean, that has no teeth whatsoever. It's the stupidest thing out there with saying your wins are vacated. We all know what kind of team they were, and we all know where Reggie Bush was. But I'm with you. I did not realize that. If there is no association with the Heisman group and the NCAA, why did they take it in the first place? Why did they take it back in the first place if there was no association? They didn't have to. Were they doing it just to kind of go along with, okay, he did some wrong, so we're going to go along with the punishment? A, I don't know why they did that, and B, why they wouldn't give it back now is even more befuddling to me. This has turned out to be an absolute joke.
Yeah, and like I understand back then to an extent because I think in the early 2000s we were still kind of under the impression, the NCAA is this thing we have to take seriously. Because again, you brought up, Dad, those sanctions and the scholarship reductions completely changed the course of USC football for the rest of the 2000s and the lead up, right? Pete Carroll ends up taking the Seahawks job after that and changes some of NFL history. But in college, it's taken USC a long time to get back to anything resembling truly competitive football based off that. It was a massive hit for them in that moment. And so for everyone involved, the NCAA still felt like Dad coming in and being able to punish you at that point versus now where we've seen they don't really have a defined place in college football. At every turn, the NCAA is being beaten back and scolded by somebody else and reminded by a higher court that they don't actually have jurisdiction here. And so again, I think it's more, hey, we got a different frame of reference for this organization that people felt the need to bend the knee to for a long time right now. And it's an easy opportunity for people to, in my mind, get wins right now. This is an easy win for Johnny Manziel to come out and do here. I don't know how much one man's boycott actually, even for as impressive as Johnny Manziel was as the 2012 Heisman winner my senior year, I don't know how much one man's boycott. Hell, I don't even know if you could stage a mass boycott of former Heisman winners, how much that really moves the needle overall. Maybe it does for the Heisman Trust to then do the thing where they look around and go, oh, that's right. No one else is listening to the NCAA, so why do we need to care either when we can just say, yeah, we understand Reggie Bush at that time was being punished for something that now would just be par for the course. And so we're going to take it upon ourselves to get the easy PR win. That's what the NCAA really affords you right now, Dad, is a chance for easy PR wins against the most vulnerable punching bag in sports.
Yeah, I agree. And Johnny Manziel is coming out in support of Reggie Bush, saying he's boycotting. Listen, it's a cool thing for him to say, but as an individually, it will have zero effect. Will have zero effect on whether he's going to get his award back or not by Johnny not showing up. But we all watched the Heisman presentation, and what's behind the winner there when they go up to give their speech? Usually about 20 or so former Heisman Trophy winners. You get a lot of those guys who go there year after year to say, you know what, we're not going there. You get that space to be sparse or empty. And maybe you talk them, maybe the Heisman Trust is like, you know what? Maybe we should do this if all these players, one, like I said, one isn't going to do it. But if there was a group effort, and I have no idea, if that would happen at all. But I do know, and I know we both agree with this, he should have his Heisman back. It's not even a question whether he should have his Heisman back. So maybe what Johnny started here, maybe some others jump into this. We'll just have to wait and see.
He did say that there have been others. He's like, and he said this when he was on Club Shay Shay with Shannon Sharp. This is a conversation that happens every year at the Heisman Trophy ceremony where people are saying it doesn't sit right with us that Reggie's not a part of this group with us based on what he's accomplished. So I don't know. It just seems something that's been silly. I am a Heisman voter, so I say all of this with all due respect because I'd like to keep my vote. Heisman Trust, appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me.
I'll say it's wrong. I don't have a vote.
There you go, exactly. Claudia can let loose on him here. I'll just sports whisper all of this to Claudia right now. But no, I think you can love something and also want it to be better and acknowledge that this is a pretty easy place where they can improve.
Yeah, and honestly, it sounds weird to say, but I think social media might have the biggest impact here. Because like we said, Johnny Manziel is just one guy, as good as he was in college to win the awards. The impact he has on social media is big, and sort of get everybody to rally behind him with all of the Heisman guys. This could turn into a one everybody thing where it is blank behind them in the stage and they look around and say, yeah, we have to change this. This isn't just Johnny Manziel's feelings, this is everybody.
Could be stock up for former Heisman winners getting hired by ESPN because you've got Desmond Howard, you've got Tim Tebow, and some guys on the payroll that I'm sure because ESPN puts on the broadcast for that would have to be there. So maybe they just hire up a bunch of former Heisman winners so they don't have to deal with the empty backdrop there. They can put them all there because they're on the payroll. Chestnut checkers.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, To Claudia's point, because we have seen brush fires started on social media that have turned into monster fires, but it has to be something that would affect what you're trying to affect. What's going to affect the Heisman Trust to make them do it? That's what we're looking for, right? What can you take away from them? Because that's what it's always about. You get the brush fire turning into a full fire, advertisers start pulling away from companies, and then you see some kind of change. Other than that, a lot of times you don't. So I don't know what the effect would be on the Heisman Trust to make them say, this is not good what's going on for us. We may better think about this. And I do think one of the big things would be that empty stage behind them, but I don't know where everybody is together on this. And while I believe it works in the past, I'm not sure what a social media run would do here either.
You know what? It's taken a lot to get me to say nice things about USC, but this is always one of the subjects that does. So hopefully Johnny gets on to something. Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Claudia Bellafato here in Boston with me. We got a lot to get to in hour number 2 of the show. The Milwaukee Bucks did the thing last night without Giannis Antetokounmpo. What does it actually mean in terms of the Eastern Conference playoff race when we talk about the top end of the spectrum? The Lakers maybe starting to get hot at the right time. We will see. And I also want to get this at Gojo and Golic on Twitter. What are you willing to give up and forego until Reggie Bush gets his Heisman back? Johnny Manziel has been willing to forego the Heisman Trophy ceremony. He will not stand up there. So much like Lent, where people like my father just give up things that they were already not going to take part in or not willing to make part of their everyday life anyway, you can give something up so that we can all get Reggie Bush back as Heisman. So at Gojo and Golic on Twitter, to help us out with all of that, our dear friend Charlotte Wilder joins us for a Wilder Wednesday on a Tuesday. Don't adjust your dials. You guys know her as one of the co-hosts of Oddball with Amin El-Hassan, a podcast and a show you can see every day on DraftKings Network except for Monday. Charlotte, what's going on, buddy?
Oh, man, I'm so happy to be here. Now I'm thinking of all the things I already don't do. You know, I think I'm going to give up running until Reggie Bush gets his Heisman back. I haven't done that in a hot minute, but I'm thrilled to be here with you guys. You know, I know that I'm probably throwing everyone for a loop with the Tuesday on a Wednesday on a Tuesday, but I love hanging out with you guys in this hour, so maybe people can start getting a little used to it.
Charlotte, I think the running is a great one. They're not acknowledging Reggie's runs in the NCAA, and so you're not going to run until Reggie can run free again here. That's big brain stuff, Dad, from Charlotte.
Oh, I'm with you. I'm going to give up vegetables until he gets his Heisman back. So that's the route I'm going to go. I'm willing to make that sacrifice.
Wow.
Dad is going to give up valuable nourishment until the Heisman Trust feeds our souls and our desire to see righteousness restored to anything. Claudia, do you have anything offhand right now? Do you need time to think? I don't want to put pressure on you.
I'm not going to eat mint chocolate chip pancakes.
Oh, Christ. Here we go.
Come on.
So, Charlotte, I don't know if you were privy to all this yesterday or not, but we had a little bit of drama on the show. We've got actually a flashback rip for you here of the crimes against my family that Claudia decided to commit yesterday.
Mint is meant for toothpaste and mouthwash, not a cookie, people. I'm sorry, I know it's a hot take. I think Thin Mints are the worst Girl Scout cookie.
Dad, you okay?
It's just, give me peanut butter, give me coconut.
I don't think I've ever been as disappointed in a work child in my life.
I wish you guys could have all seen. I have large Charlotte Wilder face next to me on the big screen here in the studio, and the looks of shock, awe, disappointment, disgust. I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth or not, Charlotte, but that's what I saw.
No, I just, you know, when you meet someone and you're like, I really feel like I know this person, and I feel like they're, her heart's in the right place. And like, Claudia, we were all rooting for you. We were rooting for you.
We were all rooting for you.
Guys, it's my first full week. Don't gang up on me, okay?
Listen.
Come on.
In all seriousness, I'm not one to gang up on people for their food opinions. You like what you like. You don't like what you don't like. I did, however, first of all, I also am biased. I love mint stuff. I really do. I chopped mint up and put it in a farro salad last night. And I was sitting there and I remembered this meme that I once saw that was like, have you ever seen a more versatile herb? Like mint is in toothpaste, mint is in ice cream, mint is in salads, mint is in, you can put it with like lamb, you can put it with strawberries, you can do it like, it's the workhorse of the herb, and Thin Mints are my favorite, but also my husband doesn't like mint in stuff either, in sweet stuff either, so I can't go too hard. But
Charlotte makes it sound beautiful.
It's a 5-tool
herb.
Charlotte
just gave us a beautiful whole description on mint, and I'm just here hating on it.
It's so nice you decided to wear it as a color today, for God's sake, for anyone watching on the DraftKings.
You guys have ingrained mint into my brain now, so thank you.
Well, Dad has ingrained mint into his stomach, so this all came, Charlotte, because we had the folks at IHOP that are doing the crossover as Girl Scout cookie season is on hand. They decided to go the Thin Mint pancake combination at IHOP for a limited time, and intrepid reporter Mike Golic Sr. went out on the case yesterday. Charlotte, you've seen the pictures that have made their way to social media of my dad here. What'd you think of this?
Oh, I sure have. And I have been waiting with bated breath to hear this official review. I'm guessing it's going to be positive because they're all gone in the second picture. But Senior, take the floor.
Where the waitress comes back and goes, oh, so you didn't like this at all.
So let me tell you. First, they offer it in 2 pancake or 4 pancake. And why anybody would ever get the 2 pancake, I don't know.
That's true.
You'd have to get the 4. Got little cream cheese on the top, got whipped cream over the top of that. And then, of course, the Thin Mint Girl Scout, oh, my mouth is watering, cookies crumbled over the top of it. And let me just say, I was there with my wife, with Chris, your mother, Mike, and we both loved it. As your mother said, there are things that are worth eating enough of to make yourself sick. And this is one of them.
No
that
way.
I would eat enough of these pancakes to make myself sick. They're that good. I would add this. She liked there's the ratio, right? Of Thin Mint cookies to whipped cream to the green pancakes. There's a ratio there which she liked. What I would do, I liked it as well. I did like it as well. What I would do though, because when there's something seasonal, like pumpkin around, October and that, I say, go all in. So what I would do, if I were you and you really like the mint chocolate chip or the mint cookies, the Girl Scout cookies, take a sleeve in IHOP with you.
Oh, come on.
That way,
Who's gonna do
if
that?
if you are not satisfied with the crumble to whipped cream to pancake ratio, like next time, and I will have these multiple times before they're gone, I will go in with at least a handful of Thin Mint cookies in my pocket. I will bring them out when the plate is laid in front of me. I will crumble them in my hands and let them fall over the pancakes where they may, and then enjoy that.
You could probably just ask them to put more on it.
Right.
Too.
Like, you've got them there. Right? It feels like an unnecessary step in the process, Charlotte.
I don't want to be that guy, but I was like, you could probably say, like, can I get extra? Like, I'm the freak who goes into a coffee shop and I'm like, can I get a cold brew with more milk than usual? And they're like, what? And I'm like, oh, I guess you would say like extra milk, but like I don't bring my own milk in.
Look at that face. That guy doesn't ask for more cookies. He brings them.
Yeah, that's a real hopper who brings his own cookies to the hop.
I'll say this. When I go extra, I like when there's whipped cream on my pancakes or my waffles, I like so much whipped cream that I can't see the pancakes or the waffles. They are buried under. And rarely is a restaurant going to do that much for you unless you keep asking. So I don't know if I say extra cookies, if they will actually, in fact, bring out enough extra cookies to satisfy my need for the Thin Mint cookies.
I get that.
This is, again, it should be no surprise to anybody that type 2 diabetes runs on my dad's side of the family. It is, I said it yesterday, it's literally taken over him like Venom in the Spider-Man franchise, where it just becomes him and you hear him drooling all over himself, food horny as the day is long. So that being said, they looked incredible. I'm not surprised that they were great. I am also on the mint train. I had mint chocolate chip ice cream yesterday when I was on a walk, gallivanting around here in Boston. The heart wants what it wants. And so I'm going to find these pancakes. I'm going to put a hurting on them. They're going to put a hurting on me. And we're all going to be better for it. Charlotte, I don't know if you have that same passion, if you're a real hopper and going to be bringing your own cookies or anything, but do you have interest in trying these? I guess is the base level question.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, like, am I gonna? Probably not. But I think, honestly, I think the last time I went to IHOP, I got grounded. I think it was the only time I got grounded. I think I had just gotten my license. I was 16 and my dad was like, okay, cool. Your one rule is you have to be home before midnight. Not only because that's like a reasonable time to be home, but that's like that was the Massachusetts state law. Like you had to, like you couldn't be just getting your license and driving around past midnight. And I went to IHOP with some friends and it was 12:30 and I was like, oh, I think I just did the one thing I wasn't supposed to do.
Badass.
And then my parents weren't like big on punishment, so they didn't really know. My mom was like, so how do we ground you? And I was like, I'm not going to tell you. I was like, you can figure it You can figure it out. And then I don't think they ended up grounding me. So IHOP has a special place in my heart. If they're listening, you can sponsor me.
Charlotte, that's very metal of you. IHOP at 12:30.
The original House of Punishment. Yeah. International House of Punishment. There we go.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
People think the P stands for pancakes, but they're wrong.
No, they are wrong there. Shout out, God, that's a lot more badass than mine. I would go there. Ron Paulus, who was the quarterback coach at Notre Dame at the time, was the guy that recruited my area. So every time he would come in town to visit me when I was in high school in Connecticut, we would go to the IHOP in Bloomfield before school, and those would be our visits as we catch up here. So shout out to Ron. Appreciate you and Notre Dame picking up the tab on that one. Shout out to Charlotte, being a badass, going to IHOP after hours. Shout out, speaking of real hoppers, to the Milwaukee Bucks. Claudia, as we had the Bucks without Giannis Antetokounmpo getting it done last night, maybe sending a little bit of a message that the Eastern Conference could have another premier player heading into the home stretch.
Sure. No Giannis, no problem for Milwaukee. They took their win streak to 6 straight with a dub over the Clippers, which was a game that you should look at. That's no slump there. Giannis watched from the bench with a left Achilles that was missing his 3rd game of the season, but Dame Lillard said, "Don't worry, I got you." He dropped 41 points in the 113-106 win. Now, keep in mind, they entered the break 3-7 with Doc Rivers in his first 10 games. So now's the point where we can sort of sit back, look at that game in particular and sort of the stint they've had with Doc Rivers thus far. You mentioned it. Now let's ask the question, are they a dominant force in the East? Can they keep up what they have now on a 6-game win streak? And Charlotte, curious what you have to think on this team. Of course, Giannis's health is a big part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Giannis's health is a huge part of it, and we'll see what that Achilles situation turns into. This part of the season it's like such a grind. You're like, oh my God, these guys have been playing so hard for so long, and this is a playoff push. I think the 6-win streak is impressive. I think that when you have the Celtics on an 11-win streak, anything in the East is gonna look a little. Everything has this thing hanging over its head, which is the Boston Celtics, because they are so terrifying to other teams. I do think though it'll be so fascinating to see what happens in the playoffs, because, you've got Dame, who is known for being so clutch, and the Celtics, who in the past have been falling apart in those high pressure moments. I would love for that not to happen as a fan of the team. I think that this year has proven that they've done a lot to remedy that, and they've got the size they need now. But the Bucks are fascinating because Doc kept making all these excuses, and now things are sort of starting to turn around. But this road trip they've got coming up, guys, seems a little tough. Are you familiar with this schedule?
I was just going to say, we have a graphic here to show everybody the gauntlet. So 4-game road trips at Cali. It starts Wednesday at Golden State, includes a rematch with the Clippers. Then they get the Sixers, the Suns, and the Celtics all in that. I mean, you couldn't ask for a worse stretch of games, really.
It's a brutal stretch of games, and it'll be a good litmus test for a team that, as Charlotte pointed out, didn't have Giannis last night. Chris Middleton also missed his 11th straight game.
Right.
And that's something to monitor when he can come back. But, Dad, what I will say for this Bucks team as they go into this stretch is they have delivered on the promise that this organization was hoping for when they fired Adrian Griffin, which is the defense has to get better. And since they made that, in that stretch, they're number 2 in the NBA in defense, tied with those Boston Celtics. And so what we've seen from this team that's seen Bobby Portis go off and be a big part of that as well, that's seen Patrick Beverley come over and have the usual impact that he does on the overall team defensive sphere. Dan, when you take care of that part, you understand Giannis is coming back. And man, if the Middleton thing ever coincides at the right time, this could be a team that we know record-wise is right there in the mix, certainly at the top of the East. But quality of play-wise combined with postseason experience, that's the kind of stuff nightmares are made of, given the Boston Celtics' recent history with this.
Well, I think that's what Bucks fans and the Bucks are waiting for, is to get actually a complete team. And I do like what Dame said after the game. He said, Doc didn't come in and say, Giannis isn't playing tonight. Obviously, Middleton was still out, and this is what we're going to. He just went in there and talked about the game plan they were going to go out with the players that they had. And, then who else steps up? You mentioned a Bobby Portis, comes off the bench and goes for 28 and 16. So you have to have somebody else step up here. But I'm still waiting to see what this team is going to do when Chris Middleton is back. He's been out with the ankle since February 6th. These three, Dame, Middleton, and Giannis, have barely played together. So if they can get themselves a handful to 10 games together before the playoffs, they've already jumped Cleveland. They're back in the 2 slot right now. They're not going to catch Boston, so I think the best they'll do is number 2. But I'm really anxious, Charlotte, to see this team when they're firing on all pistons going into the postseason, if in fact they can get to that point.
Yeah, they're firing on the pistons that Detroit somehow completely lost.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right. I think that the Middleton equation is huge. I also think, Mike, I love what you said about, they did what they were supposed to do, which was figure out the defense. I think the first game that Doc Rivers was a coach for, I was watching, and they already had Giannis back in the post. They had him just blocking shots. They weren't trying to do the perimeter stuff that they'd been trying to do with him in ways that were deeply frustrating and also not that effective. And I think the whole Bucks situation has been so fascinating in terms of just like a management people standpoint, right? It's how do you motivate people? It's how do you give different people what they need? How do you, and something that I said at the time that I still think is very admirable is that the Bucks just fired Adrian Griffin. People were like, oh, I don't know. They have one of the best records in the league, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, but clearly he had lost the locker room in a way that we were headed downhill. And instead of wait till the end of the season when this was potentially a disaster, they did something about it. And the fact that for all the grief we give Doc for all of the excuses he makes, he has implemented the changes that they needed. I think sometimes that is all it takes to get your players and get morale back where it needs to be. I think making the changes you need to make and then watching those be successful, sometimes that gives you the hope that you need to be like, you know what, I think we do have this. And I also think that Middleton being out is almost more hope because it's like, well, let's get this guy back and then let's see what we can do. I think it's sort of, it's gearing up at the right time. I think that the beginning of March is such a crucial time for things to be going well for a team or trending upwards. And the Bucks seem like they're in that place.
Yeah, I think you're right. For all the Doc slander that went on in recent weeks, it's a reminder that most of the Doc problems are rich folk problems, right? Doc can come in and set a floor with the best of them. He's a competent adult in the room. And for Adrian Griffin, who was trying to figure this stuff out for the first time on the fly with a team that was one of the ready-made contenders in the Eastern Conference, Doc coming in and immediately being able to reset the feng shui in the room does a lot and goes a long way for a team that we didn't think, based on the talent there, needed a lot. The Boston Celtics are still far and away the best team in the East. Full stop with all of that. And Charlotte, I do think, should still rightly be favored against this team or anyone else in the Eastern Conference. I think talent-wise, if Boston plays their best basketball, the only team that should stand in their way is the Denver Nuggets. That should really be the only mainstay here.
Yeah. Yes. I think that this team is terrifying, but it's terrifying in a way where as a fan of that team, you're just like, how is this happening? How is this true? How do we sustain it? I think maybe for Boston fans, or maybe this is just me who's watching the Patriots dynasty, it's like the perfect regular season of the Patriots where then you're like, I don't know. Are they gonna, it feels like, how can they do this and then win the finals? But no, I mean, obviously Denver's what stands in their way, and maybe another Western team that gets lucky.
So which team, Mike, would be the bigger disappointment to not win the title? The Boston Celtics or the Los Angeles Dodgers?
Oh, God. I mean, I would say right now, probably the Boston Celtics. Just we haven't seen the Dodgers
recency
play
bias,
yet.
yeah.
Well, and like we don't know how it's going to come back. The Celtics, we've
I was like,
seen.
do you mean the Lakers?
Yeah, I thought for a second
And
you were
then
going to
I
go
was
the
like,
Lakers,
oh.
too.
And then I got it.
No,
Now, you know what? It's an interesting thought because there is more hype around this Dodgers team than there was even for the Celtics.
You would think that you would think the Dodgers is a failure, but also baseball's so tough. You look at what happened last year, so baseball's tough to win. What the Celtics are doing, it would probably be the major disappointment if they don't get it.
That's the thing. It's all set up and right there in front of them, and so if they can't go and close the deal based on what we've already seen, they have proven they're the best team in basketball. If they don't finish the job, then you get that stare down.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. It's looking question mark more and more likely that Kirk Cousins is headed to Atlanta. The reason I'm saying question mark is all the reports surrounding this is a little bit cryptic, but it did come out from Pro Football Talk that indications are building of potential Kirk Cousins move to Atlanta. Mike Florio reported it cryptically, again saying, we can't get into the specifics for now, but as sportsbooks do, and as the DraftKings odds makers did here, is they shifted the odds. So if we're looking at the market for Kirk Cousins' next team, just this morning, the Falcons were minus 175. They were plus 190 yesterday, so that money coming in made them the favorite this morning. Now they're minus 225, guys, which means basically the Falcons are the landing spot, but the odds have changed based off of what we're hearing. That's how these markets work. So yes, Vegas doesn't always know the answer, but it sounds like this is what's happening. And he has family there. His wife is from there. Curious what you think, Junior, on the fact that Kirk Cousins could be a Falcon.
Yeah, so it makes a lot of sense from the Falcons standpoint, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, they would love this. They have just brought in a coaching staff that's largely based off, Raheem Morris coming over from the Los Angeles Rams. They bring Zach Robinson, who was the quarterback's coach there. We know that system and its connections through Kyle Shanahan to Kirk Cousins, who has always been a quarterback valued by Kyle Shanahan. And I think in this tree is something that people look and say, the heavy play action stuff, the way they want to structure their pass game for a quarterback as deadly efficient as Kirk Cousins is, this is a great starting spot. He's a great starter pack quarterback for a coach in Raheem Morris who is looking to make a better go at it this time around in his second stint as a head coach and who wants to get off to a good start. Dad, the biggest thing in this for me still is I struggle to see, and maybe Kirk Cousins, all-time contract negotiator, is just trying to hit Minnesota over the head for too much to stay there at this point, even coming off an injury-riddled season. But man, it would seem like a tough juncture for them to let Kirk Cousins walk out of the door unless all of a sudden he's going and asking for, $45, $50 million a year.
Right, I would agree with that. The amount is going to be the interesting thing, and he's been in Minnesota, 6 years now? We always talk about with free agents, or I certainly have for the amount of time I've been doing this, as everybody's different in their thought process of what's going to make them move and why. Is it money? Is it for a ring? Is it for geographical reasons? We know what kind of family guy he is as well. His wife being from there, his wife's family being from there. You wonder how much that will, as he's coming to the later part of his career, maybe that's important to him. Atlanta is going to pay. I believe they're going to pay anyway. I don't know what Minnesota will pay. And that's a winnable division outside of Carolina. Between New Orleans, Tampa Bay, and Atlanta, that's a free for all division. So getting him there in Atlanta, I think, would certainly help in their quest to win that division. But I'm with you. I don't know where you are on this, Charlotte. I don't know why Minnesota would let him go. He's going to get a short deal, but he's going to get a lot of money again, most likely. And if I were Minnesota, I'd be like, let's try and continue this run.
Yeah, I think before he got hurt, they were cooking. They were so good. Like Kirk Cousins, I remember watching the game where he got hurt, and it was just like, it's like a train losing momentum. And I thought for sure it was like, okay, well, if they did this well and they managed to sort of piece wins together without him. And it was exciting to think like, well, what's going to happen when he's back? He's got so many weapons. But his wife is from Georgia. We know this. Her family is still there. I think Kirk Cousins is 35. I think a lot of times when we talk about this free agency stuff, like, yes, obviously it's a team, obviously it's money, but there are these intangibles of like, hey, these are people with lives and families. And sometimes the thing that you want or the thing that is going to keep your family in the best position is to be somewhere else. And I would be surprised if, I don't think Minnesota should let him go because I don't really know what they do. Like, there is not a better option for them than Kirk Cousins right now. But listen, if it's like, I think it's time to be closer to the in-laws, then maybe it's time to be closer to the in-laws. That's a gravitational pull that I guess the other gravitational pull is money. So we'll see which one wins out, Kojo.
Well, and that's kind of where I've always gone is Kirk Cousins. For all the stuff about being a family man, Kirk Cousins is the ultimate faith family football guy that we've seen in between bouts of shirtless chain wearing. This man is about the money. This man has bet on himself routinely in ways that have changed his family's future forever financially. And so I struggle to think at this juncture it's going to be about anything other than the money. And fit certainly helps. And I think at both spots, Atlanta, Dad mentioned before, an infinitely winnable division at this juncture, given what's gone on. Tampa Bay, obviously, last year got the leg up with the way that they performed. But the way Atlanta's defense came alive last year and what they've got on that side of the ball personnel-wise right now, knowing Raheem Morris comes over after helping a young defense and the Rams squeeze as much as they could out of that roster, there's a thought that, man, if the offense just got competent quarterback play, Raheem Morris said it himself at the Combine, if we had even decent quarterback play last year, I'm probably not the head coach here, and we probably still have that current regime. You look at the assets that both have here, the Atlanta Falcons and the Minnesota Vikings, both, according to SpotTrack, are nearly identical in terms of available cap space, about $41 million in available cap space here. So well above average, both able to make the money work there. And for Minnesota, it gets interesting, Charlotte, to your point of what they would do sans Kirk Cousins. They sit at an interesting spot. They're 11th in a draft that has the quarterbacks climbing ever higher every time we talk about it. And we're at a fever pitch coming off the Combine where everyone's looking and going, Jaden Daniels should go number 1 overall now. And J.J. McCarthy's name starting to come out as that late riser again. And I saw Diana Rossini over at The Athletic said that there was an NFL GM that told her you could see quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, and 4 in this draft. And so if that starts happening, and unless they're willing to make moves, If Minnesota lets this go by the wayside, yeah, you've got Russell Wilson that might be freed up now after getting cut, or it's announced he's going to get cut in Denver. You could have Baker Mayfield if Tampa Bay doesn't make that work out. But, Dad, this is a game of musical chairs that you could be on the real bad receiving end up real quick if you don't play your cards right in Minnesota.
Yeah, it depends on what Minnesota wants to do. We sit there and talk glowingly of Kirk Cousins, saying he's still their best option to win that division, but they could sit there and say, we've been here 6 years, and when it matters most, we're not getting it done. So let's, cut ties. We won't pay that big money in the short amount of time to Kirk, and we'll move on to a different quarterback. There could be that thought process as well. Minnesota is hurting in the running back position, right? They let Dalvin Cook go, let Madison be the guy. Now they're going to release him. So, their running back situation is horrible compared to Atlanta's, where they got a two-headed monster going on there. So I'm not sure what Minnesota would do here. If I'm a veteran in that locker room, knowing that with the veterans we have, if all of a sudden, Charlotte, we get ourselves a rookie quarterback,
Dad, we heard it
one
from
of the
Justin
things that
Jefferson
happens
at
is
the Super Bowl, who they're getting ready to hopefully re-sign to a monster deal. He said, I want Kirk back. I don't want to have to take that step back in our production and continuity.
So that's a thing. There can be ownership that all of a sudden sees something and says, why can't it happen there? Owners see C.J. Stroud going to Houston with a rookie coach and a rookie quarterback, and they make the playoffs. So they're like, see, we can do that. When that's an exception and not the rule, so don't bank on that. So I do think Minnesota is in an interesting situation of where they want to go.
Yeah, I think it's so easy for ownership to see the shiny new things other places have, but the Texans were in a completely different situation than the Vikings were. The Texans were pretty much rock bottom. The Texans were like, wow, if anything goes well here, that'll be great. And it's those expectations, I think, in any group of people, any team situation, if expectations aren't clear, and if the roles that people have to play to meet those expectations aren't clear, and if there needs to be additional training or things figured out that don't mesh with people's expectations, that's when you start to get in trouble, and that's when locker rooms can start to fall apart. And with Kirk, I think that there are very clear expectations. I think that he's made it very clear who does what when he's in the system. So I think it would be very tough for them to start over. That being said, magic happens. Sometimes someone comes along and it's just the right thing, but I would be surprised if that was the way they went.
It does. The biggest difference, though, on what you mentioned, too, with the Texans is they had the number 2 overall pick in the draft. The Vikings are sitting at 11. You could be dealing with the 5th best quarterback in this year's class by that point, if that's the route you want to go for a reset. So not walking into the party with as much in terms of ammo. Speaking of shiny objects, coming up next, let's talk about them Cowboys and the future for a now goateed Dak Prescott, up for debate in Big D next.
Gojo and Golik, Dak Prescott is entering the final season of his contract, and no word yet from the Cowboys on extending him. This is a $60 million salary cap hit. David Hellman of Fox Sports had to say this coming off of the Combine last weekend. Sure feels like the people who spent the week in Indianapolis see a Dak extension as the less likely of the two outcomes between now and March 13th. But according to Dak, he's just fine. Here's what he had to say on Monday at an event in Dallas on his contract situation.
How hopeful are you that you can get a deal done?
Yeah, I'm definitely confident. Obviously, it helps the team. It's important for the numbers. I think as Jerry, I've heard Jerry said that. Kind of helped me over here and told me that part, right? That that is a process. Both sides understand that. Everything's great. And it'll happen.
A little murky in Jerry's world, but Dak's feeling good. He's feeling confident. Also, just had a baby, so it's just good vibes all around in the Dak Prescott household, guys. But weird situation in terms of the Cowboys not bringing up extending the contract, but he sounds like he's had good conversations. What's your take on this one, Gojo?
Yeah, I feel like this might be the goatee energy coming into play. I think Jalen Hurts shaved his, and so now there can only be one goatee in the NFC East at any given time, even though I think it's a largely regrettable facial hairstyle for men as someone with personal experience with it. But we don't have to spend too much time on that. What we can spend time on, Dad, that I do think is interesting is the public back and forth we have playing out right now. Because Dak says this after Friday, Jerry Jones told beat reporters, yeah, you know, if we can't come together and figure out a deal at this point, we're fine playing it out as is. We can figure this out. And really, we know the cap hit that comes associated with that if they decide to do it. Even if they wanted to do a restructure because he's got some void years on the deal, that could end with him having as much as a $55 million cap hit next year when he could be playing for another team. So the stare down that's going on right now, Dad, in public, the game of chicken, how do you think it ends?
There's no way they can go into the season with a $60 million cap hit on your quarterback. And right now they're I think $4 million over. And for those understand the start of a new league year, it actually starts next Wednesday. I think next Wednesday is the start of the new NFL league year. So by that day, all teams need to be within the cap. Again, it's $255 million, but they can't be over the cap. Charlotte, I don't know how they can go into the season without extending him and dropping that cap number. I don't get it. I mean, the going back and forth all the way back to when Dak was going to sign that original deal, but they signed other players before that. We're all like, how the hell are you doing that? You got to take care of the quarterback so you know where the numbers are. Jerry's a different cat with all this stuff, but I just don't see from a fiscal standpoint how you go into a season saying, oh yeah, we're cool with our quarterback counting 60 mil. Even though the cap went up as much as it did, that's still one hell of a cap hit.
Yeah. Oh God. Do you guys feel like, I feel like every offseason we're talking about Dak and it's just like sort of depressing. It's just like, okay. Like last year I thought maybe things are finally turning around, right? He had that 8-game streak where he was just taking matters into his own hands. And then again, you get to the playoffs and it all falls apart. And sure, some of that's on Mike McCarthy because that's what Mike McCarthy generally does. But it's also like he's been there. How many years has he been there now? 6, 7? What are we? I always get confused when it comes to Dak because it feels like he's both new and has been a Cowboy for the past 40 years. I think the most interesting thing to me is this game of chicken you talked about, Gojo, because I don't think that I would really want to play chicken with Jerry Jones, and yet I feel like every offseason, Dak is getting better and better at this, and I agree. I don't know what you do. I guess what I'm trying to say is that when it comes to Dak Prescott, I have never been right guessing what's going to happen, but I've also never been wrong because it just sort of keeps going middle of the road. And you're like, well, here we are again, folks. Does that make any sense? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
It does, because I think a lot of life we look for things to give us the answer in a situation.
Yeah.
With Dak, it's never been clear because he outperformed expectations so early on in his career coming into the league, not as a first-round pick. By the way, 2016 Charlotte, so to your point, he has been in the league now and a Cowboy now for 7 seasons. outperformed early on so much that they went away from Tony Romo, who had done a similar thing as an undrafted player. But then it gets to a point where you do so much winning early on. You're the Dallas Cowboys. You've got this history of mediocrity post the triplets era that now all of a sudden the expectation is, well, you got to be the guy. And last season during that stretch, he was an MVP candidate. He was the leader in the MVP race for a while during that season. And then it dropped off a bit. And I think we all had to have this level setting conversation, Dad, where we acknowledge, all right, Dak Prescott winds up somewhere in that middle ground. Quite honestly, probably in the Kirk Cousins range of quarterback where, yeah, on any given stretch, he can give you top 5 quarterback play. Is he in that Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson range of quarterback that's a legitimate franchise alterer and a game changer? No, probably not. And if you're expecting him to do those things, you're probably going to be in trouble. But he's better than the other options because I don't think there's a ton on the table for the Cowboys right now in terms of them in win now mode. Because again, Jerry is old. Jerry is not going to be here for some massive reset. And so I do think running it back with the group you've got that you've gone all in on is going to end up being the only option given the corner they've painted themselves in financially, Dad.
You have to. They were 12-5. They won the division. And by the way, he's played 8 years with the Cowboys.
Nah, I can't do that.
Just to get the exact number out there.
Gojo said 7, and I was like, yeah, totally.
I did some bad finger counting there. I didn't feel the third finger. It was a 2 on that hand. I was sitting down here on my lap because NFL math is hard when you get drafted and then it's the same season.
hard.
You got to kind of go through. So I always have to finger count it, and I missed a finger.
That's the thing. Whenever you see when someone got drafted, you always have to count that year, as one, and not the one next. So yeah, 8 years. But getting back to the point, they have to. I mean, this guy was an MVP candidate, but Mike, the thing you said at the end is the most correct. What are you going to do? Who are you going to get? I mean, Jerry, every team wants to win every year, but Jerry is so loud about it, that we're all in. Well, no kidding. You've been all in since 96, your last, Super Bowl in trying to win. So if you truly are, I mean, what's the better option? What's the better option for you at the quarterback position? As much as people want to rip on Dak, who you getting? Who you getting? You're coming off winning the division with 12 wins. You're not mucking that up at the quarterback position. I know you're going to have a new left tackle. Tyron Smith, unfortunately, is not going to end his career in Dallas. Hall of Famer, but he's off injured as of late. But it's still a shame. You'd like to see him finish with Dallas. But Charlotte, Dak has to be on that team because there's no alternative that puts them in a better spot right now.
Yeah, I feel like, do you guys think Dak's career is sort of similar to Tony Romo's? Like, they come in, they have moments of greatness, they're looking really good, then the playoffs come around, they can't make it happen. Do you think that Dak is going to be the next universally beloved and then universally annoyed people at commentator? Like, do you think Dak is going to suddenly be just like super enthusiastic in the booth when this is all over and Romo's like, and they have like a face off over who can be the most enthusiastic? And look, I agree with you, Gojo, about that goatee energy. I think that goatee is doing a lot for this young-ish man. So yeah, I don't know. They can't do anything else. It's like Cowboys purgatory. If they could, I just don't see them winning a Super Bowl with this guy. And maybe if I'm lucky, this will be the sound that the Cowboys use in the documentary talking about how Dak eventually did win it. It's me saying, I just don't think they can win a Super Bowl with this guy. In which case, great. But I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, no,
given what we've got around the league.
We have a strong desire around here to be aggregated into one of those hater videos that happens when the team eventually accomplishes their goals. So I'm with you on that. And listen, Charlotte, people already have been hating on the Dak Prescott cadence after he did switch to that "here we go" last year. That got under a lot of people's skin because it's the Cowboys and they're on TV all the time. So I don't think you're far off with that, him in the booth. And Lord knows, if there is one thing broadcast media in the NFL loves, it's getting them a former Dallas Cowboys quarterback in the booth. So he's going to have opportunities. You can run and tell that very quickly here. And you can also believe that we are going to keep talking about this over and over and over again because it's the Dallas Cowboys and because Jerry Jones is a man whose decision-making with this particular player and the amount of time it took to get him the long-term contract to begin with. Remember the Zeke Elliott contract and all those other things that popped up. We got a history of this, so every time you think you know what Jerry Jones is going to do, remember one man just wants to watch the world burn a little bit more than most. All right, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, the third. 3 quick stories to send you off into the rest of your day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out live Monday through Friday right here on DraftKings Network, wherever you watch that, as well as the best of Gojo and Golic, wherever you hear VSiN on the radio from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern. You can also check out Oddball, Charlotte Wilder, and Amin El Hassan, a great basketball podcast that you can get on DraftKings Network every day but Friday. And if you miss any of this or our great guests like Charlotte Wilder or our friend Sal Palantonio, longtime ESPN NFL reporter who helped us contextualize Jason Kelce's retirement and place in Eagles history, you can get all that wherever you get your podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done. Guys, let's get to this, that, and the third. EA Sports putting out a little bit of a flex yesterday as there was a lot of conversation that had gone on about players who had to opt in for the new college football video game coming out. They were going to be paid $600 and given a free copy of the game if they opted into having their name, image, and likeness used in the upcoming video game. And there have been a lot of debate about, should players do this? Should they hold out? Should there be some sort of collective effort here? And EA Sports put out the graphic yesterday that said over 10,000 players had opted in to their place in the EA Sports video game, which in D1 football between FBS and FCS, there's about 11,000 players involved. So a decent chunk of change, with one notable exception. One of the biggest names in the sport, Arch Manning, it was announced, the backup quarterback at the University of Texas, would not be opting into the game, making it clear, at least the statements that we saw publicly, that he's focused on first trying to play football, which is, Charlotte, the refrain that we had heard about his NIL, where he wasn't taking NIL money because he wanted to get on the field and prove himself first. Do you think this proves anything to anyone else, or does this just make him subject to more jokes?
I mean, first of all, I think it's a dumb thing to do from a PR standpoint because he should have realized he'd be one of the only people not to opt in. So you make a lot less noise if you just do it. Just do it. Get over yourself. But I also understand from a psychological point of view, if this kid's like, oh my God, I have the biggest last name in football and I'm not really playing. I'm going up against Quinn Ewers, who's coming back, who's very, very good. And you want me to just hang around on the sideline of a video game? I can see where he would find that sort of embarrassing or just not want to deal with it. But I think you just got to suck it up in this case because it is so much louder not to do it than to do it, Senior.
I 1,000% agree. I mean, just forget it. Just let it go. Opt in, and you don't hear another word about it. Occasionally you may that, oh, you're this backup, as opposed to now you're one of the lone few or the biggest name that we know at this point who has opted out of this thing. So you're going to garner some headlines for doing it. Does seem odd, a guy that came in with this much fanfare, and we get it. Listen, he was a great player in high school with an unbelievable last name as well. So you put those two together. Did we see him sitting for 2 years, which he's going to do? He is not beating out Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers is coming back, and Quinn Ewers is a really good quarterback when we talked about where he's going to go in the draft next year. So that's been an odd one to me. But Mike, I agree with Charlotte. I mean, you should have just let this one go and don't make it a bigger headline by opting out.
I think in this day and age, it feels weird to see him sit for 2 years because usually if guys in this situation with this star power aren't playing, they're in the portal and they're playing somewhere. Yep. This is a little bit more of an old school and early 2000s USC approach where guys would wait around for 3 years, play for one, and then go and get picked top 5 in the NFL draft, lather, rinse, repeat. I think this process is either too much thinking or too old school thinking, right? This idea that's probably firmly ingrained in the older Mannings of, hey, you got to go out there and earn it on the field before you get the stuff off the field, and applying that to modern discourse isn't always a perfect one-to-one. That or overthinking. And I saw some people saying, well, if things aren't going well for Texas, you're going to have people putting out clips of this game of them starting him over Quinn Ewers, and it's going to, no one actually cares that much. They're all going to be doing dynasty mode with way lesser teams than a Texas stacked roster who's probably going to make you seem like a sellout if you're actually playing with the Longhorns, trying to win with them, as opposed to going the more honorable route of doing it with FAU or something like that. So, Claudia, I think this is much ado about nothing. Either way, we're going to get through this headline pretty quickly, but it's one of those, I would have just opted in and fallen in line, because that seems to be what he wants to do, Arch, is just fall in line until it's his time.
People just like to argue about stuff. I really think that's what this comes down to. I don't even think he thought this was a big issue until everybody's like, oh my gosh, Arch Manning didn't opt in. It's it doesn't matter. Okay, he's
Everyone
a backup in a
wants to
game, but he's a
make this
backup in real life.
stance. Yeah,
right,
they
like,
wanna
just
make this a
relax you.
stance.
Go make the character if you're really that stressed out about the video game. Like, I think we're all gonna be okay. I think we can get into that though, right? Something that is legit and a little insane. If we're speaking of social media, I guess it sort of intersects, right? Video game, social media. The Clipper Stadium has been broken into, the new one that they're building, the new $2 billion arena. It was broken into the middle of the night by two TikTokers. They climbed a ladder, got in, and as you can see on video, and I'll describe to you if not, they basically break in, start wrecking stuff. They're using the fire extinguisher. They're shooting hoops. Like, I get it, that's cool, but they're videotaping themselves and then putting it on social media. Guys, last time I checked, this is illegal. Right, Gojo?
I'm amazed that we've gotten to the point where the clout is greater than the inherent risk of being persecuted for a crime, even as a juvenile. That being said, Charlotte, they at least were getting shots of whoever this young man is. He's got decent handles and a solid jumper, so I hope he doesn't throw a potential career away over these TikTok likes.
I'm sorry, I started laughing when he shoots and then just blasts the fire extinguisher at the hoop. Like, that's pretty funny. Like, I know it's illegal. I don't condone breaking the law. You shouldn't break into stuff. But also just climbing a ladder and strolling into Steve Ballmer's playground. Like, in the scheme of things that are bad, sure, not great. Also a little funny. Like, I'm sorry. Steve Ballmer is $160 billion. I think he's going to be okay, but also, yeah.
Well, and also you can't buy better security with $160 billion than just leaving your Intuit Dome open to the public?
That, but also these kids are wearing pajamas. Like, these kids are in full PJs.
Lakers.
Just imagine their parents.
Kids kind of do that
the next morning being like, wait, that's my kid in his pajamas.
I think they were Laker pajamas.
Yeah,
they were Laker pajamas as well. To add to it.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, and maybe this is the old guy in me again. Yeah. They show their faces because there's no punishment. Nothing's going to happen. We don't punish anymore. You know, we have no deterrent to say don't do that anymore. So they're brazen enough to show their faces because nothing's going to happen. You know, it is. I agree, Charlotte. It's funny. It was harmless and such. Now, I don't know if there was any damage that was done, but God forbid one of the kids got hurt or something like that. But yeah, there's just nothing that goes against them that says, you know what, don't do this anymore. I love the last line of the article written about it in the New York Post. Inglewood Mayor James Butts has since identified the pair and their parents. You think? Could you imagine if the line said they're trying to identify? Their faces are right there. They put themselves out there so you know exactly who they are. So identifying them would be the easiest thing you could do in the world.
The punishment is that they have to become a Pistons fan for the next season.
Oh, man. See,
there you go.
I think if the Lakers were smart, they would bring them and celebrate them at Staples, not only for having better security than the Intuit Dome already has, but the fact that Lakers fans still run this town, even if the Clippers are doing big things on the basketball court right now. Quickly, Claudia, let's get to the third right now in another mistake made by a professional sports team.
Yeah, the Jaguars are cold. They wish veteran defensive tackle Foley Fatukasi a happy birthday, which was nice and all. That was yesterday at 7:19 a.m. And then 4.5 hours later, they released him. Mike Garafolo reported that they were releasing him. So where was the disconnect here, guys? How does this happen?
Charlotte, I'm amazed that in 2024, professional sports teams and people that work indirectly in communication aren't communicating very well, and that no one from the team could give that social department a heads up like, hey, we might have a roster move coming, so maybe stuff the scheduled birthday tweet, for God's sake.
Mike, I, for one, cannot believe it. Someone in sports not correctly communicating? Well, the pigs are flying now.
Yeah, this is, I mean, what can you say? It's just another instance of, and we see it in our business, the communication business all the time, where the right hand has no idea what the left hand is doing, and then something like this happens. So embarrassing for the team. Too bad we don't have Emerson around to mock to what's going on in Duval County right now.
America's team, the Jacksonville Jaguars, reminding us of the old adage in sports media, communication, it's who we are, but it's not what we do. What you should do is download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating. Check out Oddball as well when you got the chance. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow.